Oh, boy. Good morning, Gayle. Good morning to everyone. You really hit it on the head there. A week ago, none of this had happened, and now here we are. It's nighttime here still in Hawaii. So many people we spoke to, though, told us they are not sleeping because when they close their eyes, what they see is the horrors of this past week. And others use the night, believe it or not, to look for hot spots, still burning embers that could start all of this again. Let me give you a sense of where we are physically. We are south of the devastated town of Lahaina. It's a community of about 13,000 people, now most of it reduced to just hundreds of piles of twisted metal and ash. Look at these pictures. Kihei, where we are now, is home base for the relief efforts, which are ongoing, including the National Guard. You see the equipment behind me, and also FEMA. They're providing, among other things, and this is hard to talk about, cadaver dogs to help with what is a very delicate search for bodies, loved ones that have been described to us as, at this point, mostly ash, which is why of the 96 victims so far, only 2 have been positively identified, and families are being asked to drop off DNA samples. Also, the dogs, at this point, they've only covered about 3% of the total search area, so the death toll you're hearing now is very likely to rise. Among survivors, however, there is another search going on. It's a search for answers. And Jonathan Vigliotti is with me now with more on that question. How could this happen, Jonathan?
It's a good question and one that is difficult to get the answer to. It is day 6. People are still searching for loved ones, and they are demanding answers. We know they were not placed under that mandatory evacuation. County officials are now under investigation for their response. As that happens, families are being allowed to return back to what is left of their homes, describing scenes of chaos and utter confusion. And all the while, journalists are not being allowed through those same roadblocks to tell their stories.
Nearly 1 week after a firestorm torched Lahaina, a boat is one of the only ways to bypass roadblocks and document the growing crisis and investigation. Once on the ground, this is what we found. 80% of Maui's historic town in ruins. This gridlock of charred cars details the desperation as many attempted to escape a wall of racing flames.
I ran out of the car and ran for my life.
He was lucky. This survivor was with his friends.
3 of my friends in 1 car and 2 dogs died.
Those lost lives, along with so many others, are buried in fields of ash that FEMA teams with cadaver dogs are now searching through.
That is at least 5 square miles. And it is full of our loved ones.
We're walking down Front Street through the historic district, and we're noticing these orange X's on the facades of these buildings. That indicates that they've actually gone in and inspected.
Residents say they didn't even see the fire coming until it was on their heels.
We've spoken with so many survivors who say there were no evacuations issued. Even fire hydrants didn't have water. How did so much go so wrong?
The fire impacted the infrastructure of the community as well as the wind, which may have taken out several of those services you mentioned.
Fire Chief Bradford Ventura said his team never gave up fighting the fire, even under blowtorch conditions.
The firefighters saved hundreds of homes that day and thousands of lives that could have been affected.
The state attorney general is now investigating the county's emergency response.
We're the only things we have now.
For those still looking for the missing, hope fades and frustration mounts with each passing day of silence.
We get no information. This is a level of incompetence I've not witnessed before here.
And officials say that text alerts were sent out, but cell towers were knocked out, so many did not receive them. We have reached out to county officials about the response before, during, and now after this disaster. Tony, we have not heard back. We've placed many calls over several days. As all of this unfolds, many are still missing, and we do not know what sparked this fire, Tony.
And the questions are going to keep coming, and we should point out you got into the Lahaina before it was shut down on Saturday. That's where that footage came from. Jonathan, thank you very much. Your coverage has been tremendous. Thank you. And of course, many of the families living in Lahaina left with only the clothes on their backs. They were running to escape the very real possibility of being burned alive, the fire destroying their town with such terrible speed. But even people who have lost almost everything themselves are, of course, finding ways to help others.
As we walk toward the water, we see it, another sign of the unspeakable destruction not far away.
Hey, how are you?
The Maui Magic is full of tourists on most days, but now it's full of relief supplies about to depart for Lahaina. The families there have lost nearly everything.
We have families and friends. Everything's gone.
Everything's gone?
They ran out of their house with only a shirt on their back.
A lot of people just barely got out.
And we can't help but notice the toys.
Where'd you get all this?
Community.
Everybody.
People from all over the island.
Currently, the only way into Lahaina by car is 20 miles north up the West Maui Mountains, where police are checking IDs and limiting access to residents like the Guvera family. While they're bringing a Sunday load of relief supplies to their church, they're also dealing with a grief of their own.
I'm still looking for friends and close family.
Wow.
I just want to let the world know it's worse than they think.
Worse than they think.
Yeah.
Down the mountain and seemingly far away from the fire lines, we find a family doing what a week ago might have seemed impossible.
Hey, how are you?
Sleeping 20 family members in a 3-bedroom house.
So 18 people who don't usually live here are now here?
Yeah.
People in every room.
We basically have the floor pillows, futons.
3 generations made homeless by the fires and not sure what comes next. Rest here for some is hard to come by, and not because of the crowd.
Yeah, you close your eyes, you can kind of just see all the town, especially, you know, all the smoke, and then a lot of people was running down the hill.
We asked if they had any pictures of themselves together in Lahaina. And of course, the phones came out.
Everybody in this photo is now here.
Yes.
Wow.
Christmas, birthdays, a particularly favorite backyard. All scenes from 4 different family homes burned to the ground by the wildfires.
It's just hitting us because I just seen it so much. And now it's like so real.
And they tell us if Lahaina was already a tight community, now it's even more so.
It's pretty inspiring to see all the families in Lahaina that lost everything and still have the decency and go back and help everyone else.
Yeah. We also got the chance yesterday to speak with Hawaii's governor, Josh Green. He was in Maui. We didn't expect this conversation. He's a doctor, and we happened to see him as he was making his rounds at the War Memorial Complex, where evacuees are taking shelter. We got the chance to ask him about the conditions in Lahaina and the continued search for victims.
There are more fatalities that will come. The fire was so hot that what we find is the tragic finding that you would imagine, as though a fire's come through and it's hard to recognize anybody, but they're able to determine if someone did perish.
The reason I ask about the conditions in Lahaina is because the town has been hard to reach. Residents have to prove a need to be in there.
Yes.
Journalists are not going in. But when you describe it the way you just did, it's clear why.
I can share. I've twice been in. I was there Thursday and then yesterday, and I chose not to go into Lahaina today. To be totally honest, there's nothing to see except full devastation. So the buildings are almost non-existent. It was so hot that even metal contorted so that you can't believe what the building was. But that's what you see, and obviously there will not be any survivors in the area left. They've either escaped that night. And now, as we put up some temporary cell capacity, people are calling each other, so the number of missing went from in the 2000s down to 1,300. And look, our hearts will break beyond repair, perhaps, if that means that many more dead. None of us think that, but we are prepared for many tragic stories.
So conceivably, this could be hundreds dead.
They will find 10 to 20 people per day, probably, until they finish. And it's probably going to take 10 days. It's impossible to guess, really.
Hawaii has confirmed that the sirens didn't go off.
Yes.
And cell warnings, television warnings may not have gone through.
Yes.
Are you frustrated that there wasn't a better system to alert residents to get out?
Of course. I've lived here for 23 years. I've heard the siren go many times, never for a fire in my case, but for tsunami warnings and for volcanic eruption warnings and earthquake warnings. We're heartbroken that people couldn't get out or didn't get alerted. We are doing a comprehensive review already. My Attorney General, I asked her to do it, not to find fault in anyone, but to say why this worked and this didn't work.
But you would still call this disaster a natural disaster, not man-made.
I would. It is definitely a natural disaster because the winds were moving any fire between 60 and 80 miles per hour. That's a mile a minute.
And the wounds in there, I'm sure, are not the kind of wounds you see from burning your hand on the stove.
No, they're much more significant. Yeah. And an interesting thing and a tragic thing here is we're not treating more first, second, and third degree burns because the fire was so perilous that it took lives. It didn't leave survivors.
Wow.
That's really what you're experiencing. When you see mostly fatalities and very few injuries, that tells you it was a natural disaster. Like if you put a fire truck in the way of the flames that were coming through at 1,000 miles an hour, the fire truck would have been incinerated in addition to the people.
Yeah.
So it's unlikely that much could have been done except, of course, moving people out before, and that's what we'll talk about.
Welcome back to the island of Maui, scene of the deadliest wildfire in modern American history. Fires that started seemingly without warning less than a week ago, and they spread very fast with the help of wind gusts up to 80 miles an hour, more than a mile a minute. And as we told you, the death toll now stands at 96. That's for now. Officials are warning that number could rise as searches and searchers make their way through thousands of destroyed and damaged buildings, finding what they can. The fires are mostly contained. That's the good news. But there is another danger developing. Toxic fumes from melted plastic and metal, which could pose potential health risks for weeks. God, these pictures. Oh, boy. All right, we do move on for the moment to one of the island's most famous longtime residents. This is on the recovery side of things, Oprah Winfrey. She spent the past several days, along with many, many others, doing what she could to provide emotional comfort and physical aid to one of the hardest hit areas. I went along with her to a local shelter. This was just yesterday, where we were able to meet victims and also volunteers, including, and this is key, some people in both categories.
We find her at the entrance of the biggest evacuee shelter in Maui County, still home to 1,000 people 5 days after the fires, and where Oprah has been quietly visiting survivors. She wants us to hear some of the stories she's been hearing. And since cameras aren't allowed inside, we find a spot to talk just outside the fence.
If we were inside, what would we see?
You would see people lined up, cots right next to each other. You would see people with all of their worldly possessions in, like a small garbage bag.
She introduced us first to Kanani Adolfo, who, despite losing some of her own family, has been a volunteer here from the very first night.
I'm just a volunteer. I'm a nobody. I'm just part of the public. This is my county. I'm born and raised here.
You're a big somebody, girl. Don't say that.
I'm never leaving.
What do the families need now most?
For me today, every day is different.
Yeah.
I'm
every day is
talking
different.
To my heart. The mental health is, for me, the children, the kupuna, the families, everything they've seen, everything they've gone through. The mental health is for me today is my focus.
Maintaining strength in the face of so much loss.
She is one of many heroes and heroines, one of many. But this is who we are. She represents who we are in this community.
Thank you for your work.
Next, Oprah returned with two sisters, both feeling lucky to be alive.
6 hours in the water. We jumped to the ocean because we trapped.
They have 9 family members in all inside the shelter. And yet...
This is what I don't understand. Every time I've seen you and your family, your spirits are still so high. You all seem... You seem so okay, even on this now, the 5th day. What's happening?
Our life is the blessings. That's all we're thankful for.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so sad. No more memories. Everything we left. Only in the heart. It's all that we bring in.
And finally, Julius.
What happened here?
He says he heard his skin popping in the heat as he ran.
At that moment, while I'm running, because I cannot see anything, it's all black. I thought I'm gonna die.
He started praying, and then an opening.
You ran, you prayed, and you made it.
And then, I go to the harbor. I see those 2 ladies, old ladies. The old ladies cannot walk anymore. And they're crying because he cannot carry her. So what I can do, I carry her on my back.
At the waterline, he eased himself into the waves. Another survivor of Lahaina. Though for him, and for so many here, the memories are still fresh.
You're so good. You're good.
It seems like you don't realize it yet, but you're here.
You're good.
You've made it through.
And with courage and community like that, Maui will make it too.
You see entire families who've lost every single thing they have, and they're living on the air mattress and a cot and a chair, and they're still just grateful to have each other. So it's really, you know, the aloha spirit is about community and about family, and we've seen this here in ways that, you know, most people never get to imagine what that really looks like.
That is what that spirit looks like. I had a conversation outside of that shelter with a native Hawaiian woman who told me that the aloha spirit will rebuild the world. It'll certainly rebuild Maui. And on the need of the people there in the shelter, it is vast, it is emotional, the memories are fresh, guys, but there's also just really basic physical everyday needs. They need a cot, they need a blanket. One of the things that Oprah was able to do after she took her first tour through there, had a visit with people, is she went to Costco, she went to Walmart, and she bought just basic necessities. That's the level that people are still working on right now.
Yeah, she told me that she just went to get air mattresses, something as simple as air mattresses and shampoo. You know, all the stuff that we just so take for granted. But, you know, I knew Oprah would correct that woman when she said, I'm just a nobody. Anytime you were down there doing anything, you are so much more than you were. Everybody's a somebody in this moment. And it just brings out the good where people have lost everything or still trying to help others.
Yeah. And we'll continue to hear more of those stories,
Exactly
I'm sure, as the days go on, of everybody there helping each other. It is that community.
You're right about that, Dana. And Tony, we'll check back in with you a little bit later. Thank you.
People also have questions about when all this promised money will be available to people. And on that subject, we spoke to Javier Barberi, who lost his business in these fires.
Down the hatch is now a pile of dust. And thank God our other two restaurants, Small Ocean Tavern and Kihei, they're still right there. We have a fourth restaurant, Pizza Paradiso, in Napili, and that one has been untouched.
So you got back into Lahaina a day after the fires on a dirt bike.
Yes.
What did you see when you got in?
I had to see it for myself. I had to physically see the restaurant. There's so many rumors going around, and you don't know what's happening. People said that Kihei and Malo were burned, but they were not. And I drove to Front Street. I was only able to find our restaurant based off of the banyan tree. I had to use the banyan tree as a reference because every single thing was completely decimated as far as the eye could see.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many people in total work for the three restaurants of yours in Lahaina?
Over 200.
Over 200 jobs?
Yes.
And what's the state of those jobs today?
They're all gone. They're all gone.
How are your staff dealing with what could be months, God forbid, years before things are normal again?
It's horrible. I see them every day. I try to provide hope. I try to find people on the island that need people to work so that I can give them jobs. Security is a job I was able to find today. But just trying to give them hope and trying to get them jobs is the most important thing.
You've been visiting the shelters. Some of the employees are there?
Yeah, half of my staff is at War Memorial. I have staff that was at King's Cathedral. I just found out tonight that they got moved to a hotel. It's amazing. And I have staff that's in Napili, you know, in cars and in people's homes, and, you know, it's horrible.
Lahaina is home to the people who live here. It's also a gift to the world. So many people come here to visit. It's world famous for its sunsets, for places like your bar, your restaurants. What's the future hold for Lahaina? What's your plan for Lahaina?
We're going to rebuild everything back. We are going to rebuild the town back. We're going to create jobs for people again, and we'll hopefully never let this happen again.
What do you need to make that happen?
We need jobs. We need money in people's hands right now, and we need places for people to live comfortably. Those are the three things that we need right now, and we don't need it tomorrow. We don't need it next week. We need it right now. There's all these funds out there that are raising all this money, but nobody knows how to get any of it. My staff is asking me, I see this GoFundMe fund for this loss of millions of dollars. How do I apply for that? How do I get that money? money. Nobody knows how to do any of that stuff, and we're handing them cash. I'm handing my employees cash every day. You know, that's all I can do. I can't do anything else. I'm trying to find them places, and there's nothing else that we can do at this point. The government, the mayor, everybody needs to step in and make it easy for people to find a place to live, to find other jobs, and to get income right now.
Wow. Yeah, you do hear a lot of money floating out there, but it is a question of how do you get your hands on it for the people who need it.
Exactly.
Your restaurant down the hatch, your bar, is across from the famous banyan tree in Lahaina, kind of a symbol of the town, 150 years old. We've been told by the governor, in fact, that it's burned, it's scorched, it's wounded, but still breathing, as he put it.
Yes.
It might recover.
Yes.
How important is that recovery to you?
I mean, the banyan tree is one of the most iconic things in Lahaina. It's a landmark. To me, it shows strength of the town, you know, this incredible, resilient tree. And I hope to God that we see green come out of it one day.
Yeah. Well, the tree's got good roots, and the town does too. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
We're all rooting for Javier. We're all rooting for Lahaina as well. That tree, I really can't stress enough how beautiful it is. It reminds me of the trees I had growing up in Florida, banyan trees, not native to Hawaii, a gift from India in the 1870s. And the governor was telling us yesterday, he talked to some tree experts, and the tree is wounded, the tree is scarred, the tree is in trauma, much like the people here. But there is a hope that it will survive, and if it can survive, this town can survive. We're all sure of that, in fact.
I thought you said that so beautifully, Tony, when you said the tree has roots and this town does too.
Yeah.
But I hope the issue that Mr. Barberi raised about how do we get the money. All these people are saying we need the help. We hear all this money's being raised. I hope we can get answers to that question, because I think he raised a very, very, very good point.
Yep, it's all out there. People want to do good, but you've got to get it to people who need it, and they need it right now.
Right. No doubt. From the recovery, hopefully, to their pockets to help them rebuild their lives. Tony, we appreciate you.
Welcome back to CBS Mornings. You know that Mick Fleetwood is a drummer and co-founder of the legendary rock band that would be Fleetwood Mac. He's born in England, but he's called Maui home for decades. As a deadly wildfire swept through the historic town of Lahaina, his restaurant, Fleetwood's on Front Street, I've been there, was among the hundreds of businesses that were destroyed. Carter Evans spoke with him about the loss of his beloved community.
It's way over 40 years ago. A lot of history here for me, for family.
The island of Maui is where this rock and roll Hall of Famer raised his kids.
This is my home. Nowhere else.
When flames came roaring through Lahaina, Mick Fleetwood was visiting family in L.A. He immediately began buying emergency supplies, packed them onto a plane, and flew to Maui to help his community and his employees who worked at his restaurant, Fleetwood's on Front Street.
Many of them had lost their homes. I think had I been here, I still would have felt helpless, but not as helpless. There are people still in dire, dire, dire straits emotionally, with absolutely the enormity of this is not known, but the real loss is the sadness that we're all facing, is loss of life, preserving what is there in the immediacy of help.
His restaurant is destroyed, but Fleetwood says his only concern is for his ohana, his extended family, the staff of 100 people who lost their livelihoods.
The miracle.
When we last visited 2 years ago, Fleetwood's was reopening, welcoming people back after the pandemic. The venue honored Hawaiian culture, offering sweeping views of the Pacific, and was the place Mick and some of his famous friends loved to perform. We're only a few days into this catastrophe now, and I think it's beginning to dawn on people how big this really is and how long it is going to take to recover.
It's truly monumental. The fact that this culture and these islands are, I mean, look at this place. It actually magnifies how could it happen there. It's unimaginable, and something unimaginable adds, in my quiet opinion, to keeping the focus on what has to be done to put this back together.
Can you explain why it's so special to so many people?
For people not from here, it's Maui, Hawaii, Lahaina. It was charming, it was artistic, it had a history of music, it had a history of paying attention to culture. I would always reference it as going into the French Quarter in New Orleans, where although it's changed, nothing could take away from the essence.
You could feel that history.
Well, amen to that. This is where I need to be.
With more than 2,000 buildings damaged or destroyed and the loss of life continuing to rise, the 76-year-old musician is committed to helping Maui residents heal and rebuild.
You brought that community happiness through music. Can you help that community rebuild through music? Will there be a benefit concert?
Well, I think music is a hugely powerful medium, and thoughts are already on hand, first of all in here. There's no doubt that my intention is to be either part of things, to create within something, to keep this on the tip of people's thought process. And it's something I can do. It's something I aspire to be doing. That's what I trust.
To be continued.
To be very much continued.
For CBS Mornings, I'm Carter Evans on Maui.
In the middle of all that, I heard people said that they saw rainbows. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow when he said to be very continued. He's right.
Such a long road to recovery. And it's not to compare disasters, but I keep thinking about Katrina and the lessons that were learned there that hopefully people now can take to Maui in trying to recover and make that somehow a better process for the people there.
And Mick Fleetwood is just another example of people that have moved to Hawaii from all over the world. And not just the people that have moved there, but the people that have enjoyed the culture of Hawaii. It's a shining example of how much we appreciate that area and why we should also be doing more and helping give back and helping them recover and rebuild.
And that's exactly why Mick Fleetwood is speaking up. I've been to the restaurant, Nate. You would like the food.
Yeah.
You would like the food.
Hopefully they get it up.